Hey guys, this is Ash and you're watching WriterGAsh. So let's talk about Throne of Glass today. So I don't know how many of you know, or if anyone knows. Throne of Glass is my all-time favorite series. I have been in love with this series since I first read it, and I had first read it before Empire of Storms came out. Yes, I had read it when Queen of Shadows was already out. And I still remember reading the audiobooks and falling more and more in love with these characters and with Sarah J. Maas's writing style as I read them. And this was my gateway to Sarah J. Maas. So this was my gateway to the entire Maasverse. And despite the wonderful series written by Sarah J. Maas, Throne of Glass will always hold a special place in my heart and remains to be my favorite series. So without further ado, let's get into this video. In this video, I'm gonna be doing a book talk on Throne of Glass, which I have never done. When I did read these books, I had a blog and I wrote a little blog post about all of the ones I had read at that point in time. And I will tell you, I loved it so much because I barely wrote blog entries, and I wrote blog entries for all of these books. But before we talk about Throne of Glass, let's look at some pretty books. First, here is Throne of Glass Collector's Edition. Look at the gold foiling everywhere. There's Goldrin on the front with this beautiful foiling design next to it. There is the stag with the crown on the back. Again, the Amulet of Orans, I think. If I'm remembering right, I haven't read these books since they came out. Not most, since the newer ones came out. This is the end pages. They're just average. But no, the beauty of this book lies in the details, in my opinion. At the start of every single chapter, you get one of these swords. I just love when books do that. It just feels so... I just love how they look. And then let's not look at the words. Well, it's the first chapter, so it might be a sneak peek into you reading this book. But there are the word marks, and then there's the eye Elena. Looks so beautiful. I just love that. I'm gonna be real with you. I did not read this edition of the book when I reread this series today. Well, this book today. I read this edition of the book because while this also is pretty, it didn't cost me as much of a pretty penny. So without further ado, let's get into my customization of the Throne of Glass book. Anyway, so we've got Selena on the cover of Throne of Glass. The detailing is fantastic. Just take a look at this glorious book. The spine has a photo of her. You've got Throne of Glass. This we know for sure is Selena, and I love her. And I'm going to be talking about her today for the first time in a long time, and I'm really excited. But before we go into it, I want to show you what I did to this book. So I painted the edges purple first to match this cover. I think it complements it perfectly. I saw that these covers kind of match the original cover, so I thought they would work really well together. And then I got a stencil from Kingdom Book Designs, whose YouTube page and Etsy I'm going to link below because she's awesome. And she has provided me with all the stencil that I need for my books. And I did this. I painted a golden Goldrin on it because it just ties in this book. I think Goldrin is a symbolism I use for the Throne of Glass series. So for me, this was the perfect tie-in for all of the books, especially when this has Goldrin on it too. I haven't done anything to it. I'm still debating whether or not I want to do like pure golden edges. I think that could be pretty, but I don't want to risk it. I just love sprayed edges, and I was so excited when I got these covers. I'm like, these covers need sprayed edges. So I taught myself how to spray edges. I went through 6 sets of Throne of Glass And I sold all of the others, like all of them were like plain sprayed edges without any stenciling, because I wanted to perfect it before I touched my editions. And they're out there somewhere with people. And then buying these books became really hard for some reason. Like I couldn't find it anywhere. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, BAM. And I got lucky and I managed to get a full box set from BAM. And then I messed up a few books, so I had to get a few a la carte. So this is an array of random books I got from places and I can't tell you where. But the final product is something I'm really, really proud of. Like, this is a gorgeous edition of Throne of Glass. Well, tell me what you think about this. If you think it's beautiful, put it down in the comments. I worked really hard on these. Like, these were my project really for a solid 6 months. And once I created these, I went kind of all out and started doing sprayed edges on everything. And now I have a proper sprayed edge Caraval collection. I've done beautiful sprayed edges on the Once Upon a Broken Heart editions I have. I've got the UK, US for all of those. And then I'm going to be doing sprayed edges for my ACOTAR books, but I'm waiting on that for a bit. I'm thinking of doing simple shimmery edges. I might add a few stars, but I feel like shimmer and then stars might be too much, so I might just keep it shimmer. And then I'll make a video showing you my collection. The books up there, I've got the drip effect with so those are the darker shade of magic books, and I've done a drip effect sprayed edge there. I've also done a full Pride collection. You can go back through my videos and, well, actually I'll link my Pride collection up here. I did different Pride flags on books and created a Pride collection. But without further ado, let's talk about this. So before we talk about the nitty-gritty of this book, I want to do a quick spoiler-free review. So Throne of Glass is a adventure, really. I think the whole series is more adventure than anything else. Sarah J. Maas has very distinct writing styles with her different books. So Throne of Glass to me is a lot more plot-driven than character-driven. Her characters are always fantastic, but Throne of Glass is a more plot book. And it is definitely it has more action, adventure, and it's a little bit more fast-paced, in my opinion. I know a lot of people don't like the first book, but I was hooked on book 1, and I've been hooked on book 1 when I started reading it again. Yes, it took me a couple of chapters, because like Selena is 18 in this book. I am not anymore. And it takes me a while to get back into the mindset of reading about an 18-year-old, which is why I think I like the newer books a little bit more, because they're a little older and a little bit more my speed. But I freaking love Selena Sardothian, and this book was great. And like I said, it's more plot driven, but that doesn't take away from the fantastic characters with rich backstories that Sarah J. Maas is known to create. Selena is an assassin, and she has had her fair share of hardships in life. And you get to see like some of it sprinkled in this book, but as you read the series, her character expands tenfold. You see her character grow, but you also see it maintain the essence of who she is. And I think that is a really great way to write a character. So let's talk about this book in particular. Throne of Glass is the first book in the Throne of Glass series, and it follows an assassin, Selena Sardothian. Selena was sent to a slave camp, and which was in the salt mines called Endovier. And she was sent there for treason against her kingdom or whatever, because she was an assassin. So after about a year in the mines, the prince of the kingdom she is from, Adalin, and his captain of the guard come to fetch her. And why do they want her? They want her to be the prince's champion for the like the competition the king is holding to get his new right-hand man slash champion, the king's champion. And then ensues an assassin contest, really. It's not really just assassins. There's thieves, there are soldiers, there are like just barbaric brutes. And you follow Selena from a point where she has completely been broken by the environment she was in to going back to being who she truly is and like coming back to herself and showing you how badass really she is. And I just love how resilient Selena is, because in this series, it's known that people who go to Endovier don't survive as long as she did, and yet she, an 18-year-old child who was sent there at 17, managed to survive as well as she did and keep her mind intact. And that is quite an achievement in this scenario. And we see Selena fight tooth and nail to survive and to be the king's champion. I highly, highly recommend this book, and I highly recommend that you not watch the rest of this video if you don't want to be spoiled, because I am about to go into the spoilers. So, like I mentioned before in the non-spoilery section, the captain of the guard and the prince go to get Selena from Endovier. So the prince is Dorian, captain of the guard is Kale. If you've read the book, you know. And in the beginning, Kale really resents Selena because she's an assassin. He has been raised to hate people like her. And Dorian's just intrigued by everything. And we see Selena kind of in a rough spot when she first comes to the castle, but like she works really hard to get back to where she is. And I think a really good part of this book is the pacing is kind of perfect in my opinion. Every few chapters we have one of those like milestone chapters where she's in one of the assassin tasks, the championship tasks, and it's like, you know, there's training involved, there's the competition aspect, and there is the whole sideline aspect with the dying champions. And we also see Selena's relationship with Dorian and Kale progress. When Nehemia first comes into this book, Selena and Nehemia kind of hit off like that. I really love their friendship. I think they are the perfect pairing. Like, Selena and Nehemia can truly like depend on each other in this court where they can't really trust anyone else. And Selena at one point in the book mentions that she can't really trust girls, and we learn more about that later in the series, but she alludes to something happening at the Silent Desert. If you've read the series in the publisher's recommended order, you know who I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. And if you're rereading this series, you also know who I'm talking about here. But if you're reading it in the order I'm rereading it in, I'm going to be reading Assassin's Blade 3rd. You'll learn more about Selena's backstory there. There's a lot of points in this book where she alludes to different things we don't know yet. So she talks about her time with the Silent Assassins, which is where that happens. And that's one of the short stories in the novel, in the bind up Assassin's Blade. There is a lot of mentions of Sam. And like, I remember when I was first reading it, wondering, who the hell is Sam? Why do we care so much about him? We don't know much about him. We learn about Sam in Assassin's Blade. And like, this is not a spoiler for any other book because it's clearly mentioned in this book when Selena's talking to Dorian that Sam's dead. You don't know why it hits Selena as much as it does until you read Assassin's Blade. So like, I remember when I was first reading this series, I considered skipping Assassin's Blade. I'm like, it's a novella, why does it matter? But no, I read it. And it matters. It matters quite a lot. There's the mention of the Pirate King and her freeing the slaves. You get to see that, and it's an epic scene. I love it. But this is me pitching Assassin's Blade to you before going back to this book. But speaking of all the sprinkling Sarah leaves for the later books, there is a lot of things I noticed in this reread that I would not have expected to be mentioned so early on. We hear, so later in the book, Selena talks about more and more about her past. She mentions that she has lost her parents and how really she found that they were dead. Like, she describes that she crawled into bed with them thinking the bed was wet from the rain, from it being damp with the window open. And then when she woke up, it turned out to be her parents' blood and that they had been killed. And somehow Cain knew, and he knew because he was using these magical things, the word marks, and the monsters were whispering it to him. And like, we learned these things about her in this book, and I had forgotten that was the thing. But these things tie into bigger roles later on. I also really liked Elena in this book. She is a real mentor to Selena in this book. She helps Selena quite a lot with the contest tournament, and she really comes through for her at the end. Towards the end, when her and Cain are fighting, she's almost dead. Elena is the one that comes through for her. And I just love seeing their interactions. I love seeing Selena really thrive. There were scenes during the book when she was with the other champions and they were doubting her, and she'd do something that showed them, yeah, I know what I'm doing, bitch. I love those. I absolutely loved when she was showing Nox how to throw the knives on the bullseyes, and him being in awe of how awesome she was, because she is awesome. She's an expert who trained for years to be the best in this field. And yes, she's out of practice. She was out of practice for a year, but that doesn't take away from the fact that she is the best in this field. I say that okay, disclaimer, in real life, I probably don't like assassins, but in this book, I am in love with Selena. I wholeheartedly adore her and cannot see her faults. Yes, she has a lot of them, more and more coming up as the series goes on. But I think at the base of it all, Selena Sardotian is this charismatic, amazing character that you just can't look away from. And speaking of how charismatic Selena is, there's also the romance element in this book. So both Cale and Dorian at first weren't looking for anything with her, but they started forming an affection for her. Cale resented his affection a little bit more. Dorian was more open about it, and Cale was less so. And you can see how Cale's opinion of Selena changes, how she becomes more endeared to him as the book goes on. In the beginning, he hates being in her presence, and then he hates that he doesn't hate being in her presence. And at the end, he's openly enjoying her. Dorian's a bit more open as a person. We learn about Dorian's reputation in general, and Selena being apprehensive about being seen as Dorian's lady or whatever. And I totally understand, because who wants to be referred to as that? To be honest, if I were Selena, I wouldn't have given Dorian the time of day, because I do not have time for players. But Dorian really shows through his action that he's not what his reputation claims he is. He's a genuinely good person, and he has a long way to go. You see that development too. In this book, he isn't what I remember him to be. I remember when I first read the series being Team Dorian all the way. I love Dorian. He can do no wrong. He gave her a puppy. He gave her books. He's the perfect choice. But I can see it not being the thing. But I do love their moments together. I love that they danced all night at the Yule Ball. I love that they read together. I love that they found peace in each other in this not so peaceful time. And that they were there for each other. And that's a theme in the books. Like, a lot of shit happens, at least in this book, despite everything that's happening. Three of them are there for each other. At points, you see Kill and Dorian resenting each other because they're vying for Selena's affection. But you also never see them actually trying to do anything to hurt the other. Like, they're truly best friends, and they're true friends to Selena. And that's coming out from the beginning, in my opinion. I just really love their dynamic. And then I want to go swooshing back to the end and talk about how when Selena was dying, it was Nehemia, her true friend, or I think they refer to each other as Sister of My Heart. I think it's in the short story between Throne of Glass and Crown of Midnight. It's online if you want to look it up. But it's just a small scene when they go shopping together and Nehemia calls her a Sister of My Heart. Anyway, so what I was saying is you see Nehemia really come through for her friend. Like when Selena needs help, she's the one that uses word marks in a place where if she were caught, she would be dead. She risks her life and her freedom to save her friend. And they truly do care for each other. You see that in the scene where Nehemia is hurt that Selena was cold towards her when Selena thought that she was the one killing all the champions. And you see that she genuinely cares about Selena. And when Selena tells Nehemia she's Selena Sardothian, I think that's one of my favorite scenes in the books. And then Kaltain was another character that was present. She is vying for Dorian's affection and sees Selena Lillian as competition. And under the Duke of Parrington's influence, God, I hate the Duke. He gets progressively worse and worse. Like, he is just unbearable at first, but he makes me want to throw up, especially towards the end when him and the king kind of make Kaltain give Selena the poison and then blame her and put her in the dungeons because they're assholes. Don't get me started on that. But I feel like reading back in scenes like that, I'm like, I hate when women get pitted against women. And I just, there were some elements of this book that were like, I'm not like other girls. And I see that now. But I will say, as the series progresses, that aspect gets better. And with these characters, this is not the last we'll see of any of these characters. We'll see more of all of them and we'll learn more about all of them. And I do genuinely think that Sarah J. Maas does a good job of giving all of these female characters voices that they deserve. And then the one last thing I want to talk about is this conversation between Selena and Elena. And Elena is basically like, I fought in those wars with my husband. That's how we met, fighting side by side. And they've made me out to be a damsel in distress that waited with a damn locket. I'm like, that's fucking... Like, I'm sure that's the case in so many real life history things where they've turned the contributions of women into a damsel in distress thing or just like a sideline character. All of the achievements of women in history are probably turned into an achievement for a man. And oh God, I fucking love that she calls it out. I'm not saying that every woman in history did what every man in history did, but I'm saying there's got to be women out there in all of the years before that did great things and get overlooked. So I just wanted to point that out, that I freaking love that scene. Also, this is a slight spoiler for the rest of the series, so if you have not read the rest, just skip to the end of the video where I am no longer holding the book up like that. So in that same scene, Elena mentions something about like something Elena talks about like blood and like responsibility to one's blood or something. Oh my god, that was a fucking hint at Selena being Aelin. I did not connect the dots. I also didn't remember it by the time I found out she was Aelin. I'm not a very detailed reader. I don't remember things. I'll remember like the major things, but god, this is why I love rereading things. You notice like these Easter eggs. There were so many other hints left towards Selena being Aelin. And I freaking love that. Like anytime she talked about Terracin, the way she talked about it was so different. Like the responsibility she felt towards Terracin, it all made me feel like, god damn, like Sarah had it all planned, and I freaking love that when authors do that. Anyway, so that is it for my Throne of Glass talk. I hope I didn't rant on for too long, and I hope you guys read this book and liked it because it's one of my favorite series of all time, and I'm so excited to have reread this book.